try to see your way.
Hello, 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 and a massive hello to everybody. Hope everybody's had a great time off in this, Friday was off. Today's pretty much a dead day. So again, welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's get this cracking started. 21st/04/2014. As usual, we're not making any trade calls or recommendations because you and only you are responsible for the trades you may decide to take. The fact you're in here means you've read to understand, you accept all the disclosure disclaimers here on the website and everywhere else, understanding that we're just performing some live technical analysis and learning context for educational purposes only. As usual, sessions are recorded. You'll get an email with a recording as soon as it's over. As long as everybody uses it for their own personal use only, nobody will be blocked, nobody will be banned, and we'll all behave as one big happy family. Okay, guys, so what's going on? What I'm going to try and do here, let's see if I can pull it off, but basically I'm trying to record the first part of this session so that I can post it as the weekly outlook on YouTube, just so I can kill two birds with one stone. And then I'll cut it off after we've done a first review of the most interesting things, and then we'll focus on all the open trades and all the other stuff for the week. Okay, so first things first, I'm not going to be mentioning any names, so if I don't answer your question by name, don't worry. It's just I don't want anything out on YouTube for you guys. So what's going on? So keep in mind that today essentially is a dead day. European markets are closed. You know, we could see some movement, but basically, as far as we're concerned, this is not an active trading day. It's just a trade day where we would manage open positions or maybe looked at some key levels where we like to engage at, but not anything, you know, not tactical intraday trading. Okay. Now the week should start to get interesting further down. So basically today's pretty much a dead day. We might see some action on the futures. Let's keep an eye on that. We'll talk about that in a second. Then as terms of tomorrow for the week, we've got very light data, existing home sales in the US, so really not a big deal. It'll start to kick off on Wednesday, right? Wednesday we've got a bunch of data out of Australia. We've got all the PMI, so that'll be pretty much starting with the Chinese PMI. Then we'll have a constant stream, you know, the French, the German, the flash services, etc., etc. Then we've also got the MPC for UK numbers on the wires and some CAD data, etc. So it starts to pick up, and then big interesting thing is overnight we'll have the RBNZ with a rate statement, so that will be interesting on the Kiwi side. And then, you know, we'll got more data. We've got Draghi speaking on Thursday. It's the IFO. Then we've got retail sales on Friday. So the week should be interesting, but again, don't necessarily, in terms especially on the Forex side, would expect things to start to pick up from Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, rather than the beginning of the week. Okay, so basically let's start to look at some charts quickly, just a quick overview. So what have we got in terms of the equity side? Not a lot is going on. Again, what we said is on the ES, we're in that range, which is the 1900, 1850, 1800 range, right? And we talked about the fact that it was a bit of a chop zone. And last week we said you have to respect these daily closes, right? Once we got these two daily closes, we said extremely high odds we'd move all the way back up and test those 1850s and see the market try to stabilize there at mid-range. So it's really important to not get too stubborn and respect this kind of action. I mean, if we go on more of our trading chart in terms of the ES, if I can find that, exactly where we're hovering, right? Not a lot has changed. All those pivotal levels that for that shift of Momo worked quite nicely, and now we're hovering here. So all in all, as we like to say, much to do about nothing. The range still remains the same, 1900, 1850, 1800, and look at this 1800 as being pivotal for action during the week, right? As long as this holds above, and as long as we get daily closes above the 1850, which is the pivotal level, we'd expect us to continue to try and test the upside, to continue to try and take stops out above these highs. And if that gets taken out, especially early in the week, you know, our assumption would be for a move back into those 1887s and for the grind higher to continue. Again, if we start to get daily closes below 1850, then we'd look at some acceleration to the downside. Keep in mind, a lot of people are going to be basically put to sleep by action here, thinking that it's done, it's not going to move. Don't be fooled, right? We've had a lot of aggressive moves, and I would be very surprised if we just spend the whole week hovering around at 1850. Not that it can't happen, but I'd expect to see some attempts of some moves. You know, and that's pretty much translated across the charts. You know, we had those very impulsive longs on the FTSE, on the DAX, right? On the YM, very aggressive move back up. We're looking for those to come back into the 16,340s. You know, a lot of people saying, you know, well, what about the 50 back? You know, once we got this action, there's no way we're going to step inside of this 50 back. You know, we expected this once we broke the pivotal level to move extremely aggressively right back into these highs, and that's where we are. So look at this as a bit of a pivotal zone, not as nice in terms of structure as the ES, but clearly still holding a bid tone here, right? Crude, what's going on crude? We discussed crude. Crude, the rotation is fully in play, and that's a rotation for a move back into 108.50s, right? So basically that's still that 50 back that's holding here, and it's trying to finish the rotation right up here. It's clearly struggling here. We talked about this last week. We said don't be, you know, cautious. There's a lot of geopolitical risk across the wires. Don't expect this to necessarily crumble in this kind of scenario. We'd still prefer to tactically play intraday the upside, not the downside. But as long as we keep on closing the days above the 103.50s, expect this to try and challenge the 105.20s. And if that gives out, then 108.50s is the final target. Remember, this is the 50 back of that move into those lows, very choppy around the 100. This is pretty much TP2 done on that trade, looking for 108.50s and an extension the 112s, right? So no change really in there. That's basically also, as we discussed, those are basically all a continuation of those long moves that we discussed pretty much from last year. This kind of double bottom here at the 200 DMA on the weekly, looking for this as a cyclical low for a move back up, ultimately to test all these highs here. So that's clearly still in play. What's going on gold? On gold, not a lot. It's still holding, pretty much stuck around that 1300. It's holding 1287s. That is a key level. Again, we don't think there's a lot of edge in trying to play tight inside this range. The focus is still on the hold of this range, which is 1300, 1350, 1400. And as long as we don't get daily closes below these lows, we expect this to continue to try and find some kind of stability around this area here to ultimately try to rotate back up into those 1350s. As usual, a massive shout out to Miss Gold here. And so again, I don't think this is really the focus here. I think it could be very, very choppy, but not a lot has changed in terms of the outlook or in terms of the chart, right? A couple of interesting things going into the week, especially because we've got that rate decision on Kiwi. Again, remember we discussed this reversal at highs and this failure to hold above these new high prints, and the fact that it was hovering here, that any move back below would start to open a move back into 85.10s. Okay, so keep in mind now we're still hovering fairly bid here at highs, and pretty much we suspect that the market is just waiting for the rate decision this week to see what's happening, right? And if the assumptions of them starting to hike rates, etc., does not pan out, or we see some more hold, etc., then most likely scenarios for us to press back down into the 85.10s, and then it's going to be game on, right? Because as long as the longs can keep on holding this support zone, right, then we still have chances of this to continue to try and find some kind of basing action here, sideways chop at highs to then ultimately rotate back higher. But if it starts to press lower there, we could get a bigger retracement. So that's clearly going to be the key, very key chart, very interesting going into this week, right? And keeping in mind the GPB strength across the board, an interesting chart to keep an eye out for is also going to be GPB NZD, right? It's just hovering here at a key level. We've got a 200 moving average here. So clearly this will be very, very interesting, right? Most likely linked around this rate decision out of New Zealand. And basically keep an eye on this week. Daily closes above or below, especially after Wednesday, to give us a sign of the next rotation, whether we're going to be trying to, again, put some pressure on to come back down and test these lows, or if that's it, we've based here and we're going to make another run for those highs. So another interesting chart going into the week. As we've been talking about the GPB, so cable, really what's going on cable, not a lot has changed. It's still trying to break higher, holding highs. A lot of people were getting excited here on this failure to hold the breakout and this negative close on the daily, we'd caution against getting overly bearish here, and basically we're holding these highs. This was really the key tell for that test back into those highs. So right here, the way we're looking at it is just sideways chops at highs. So going into the week, it looks like it probably wants to try and break higher again. So keep an eye early how to behave into this support. As long as unless the support gets taken out quickly into the beginning of the week, we'd expect this to press higher, and if it's going to ultimately fail from higher levels, not from here. We still think there is some room to the upside. If it takes out those supports, then we could easily see these trying to challenge right back down into the 66.80, so 67 level. But the way this is trading, it's still holding a bid tone, still holding the retracements. That the big circle here, that's a 50 back long, triggered very nice little reversal candle at that 50 back long. And the targets for that, and I spoke about those on Twitter, were basically those 66.80s, and because it's a very aggressive move, in extension the 69.50s. So that's what we're keeping an eye out on cable. Euro, what's going on Euro? So Euro heavier than cable, still holding that gap down even though we had attempts to fill there, and pretty much hovering here. So it's trying to catch a bid at the 50 back of that move, and that's pretty much the make or break level right here, right? As long as price can continue to close above here, the bulls are going to have a chance again to try and get a move back into the 38.50s, try to get into that higher gap fill areas, and most likely shorts will come in trying to protect those highs. But keep in mind that if early in the week especially we can't hold this 50 back, then we'd expect potentially to see this rotate all the way back down into the 36.70s. The outlook here is to continue to see some sideways chop. I mean, technically it does look like it wants to still try and press into the 140s, 139, 140s. The issue is that we're getting all this verbal intervention, and it's clear that the market is not comfortable holding above those 38.50s. So every time we get there, we're getting smackdowns. So what this means is that this is no longer purely trading on technicals. So what that would mean is caution, it does not trade purely on technicals. You have to factor in Draghi, ECB, etc. So you have to be a bit smart if you're playing that. And what that likely means is that the quick pips are for range trades inside these chop ranges, and what the chart doesn't favor is trying to get into big swing trades, right? The next probable bigger swing trade will probably be on the short side, but still, unless we're trading above 139s on 140, probably not that interesting. And right here, clearly getting into big swing longs does not seem a very interesting idea in terms of risk reward. Short maybe, but there's still an underlying bid tone in the pair. So if you want kind of a range, which we've been talking about for a long time, is the chop range is that 138, 137.50, 137, and that what we talked about was at the extremes out there was at 36.50 and 38.50, and globally speaking it still seems like it's holding those ranges. So that's pretty much where we stand. We just the market doesn't have to move just because you want to trade it. We just have to deal with those ranges, right? What else? Does anybody have any other chart they want to look at quickly as I'm doing this review? CAD, we're still holding that 200 on the daily. A very nice hold there. And bam, it's starting to rotate higher. Now it's comfortably holding above the 110s. I think the big question for me is more going to be what happens around this 110.50, 110.60. We talked about these two extremes, and that we'd expect it to be kind of choppy inside this range, and that we really needed to see a break outside this range before we saw the next big move, whether that was for a move back into the 112.70s or if that was for a move back into the 107s. But globally speaking, I still think, the bigger picture, it looks like it's trying to rotate higher, but I don't think there's a lot of edge inside this range. I'd much prefer to Yeah, exactly. I'd much prefer to play the extremes, and I don't think this is, it's not one of the charts we'd be extremely active on at this time. Yeah, exactly. We're waiting for better levels to start to be a bit more active on this chart. In terms of EJ, what's going on EJ? Not a lot. Same thing as we said. You need to understand that there's no edge inside the range, and those extremes are what count, right? So there's no point trying to get excited every time we dip outside this range. It's all about the extremes. So if anything, it's long plays every time we get back inside this range for a move to the upside, and not so much to the short side, because we have broken out to the upside and it's held the breakout. So that what that means for us is we're stuck inside the range, not a lot of edge, focuses on range plays, but primarily to the long side. And right here, all those plays worked out and we're right back into the highs. So in terms of percentage plays here, it's pretty much flat. If you're looking to play the swing here on these holds, the swing is for a move back into these highs. And if we break this series of lower highs, as discussed, we're looking for back into 145.60s. But right here, the percentage play for the guys playing the range, that's pretty much done and dusted here, okay? And it's still that level being pivotal, so there's really not a lot to add here as we're stuck here. Clearly, there could be opportunities to fade the upside of the range, but because of this break, we're much more likely to play the upside than the downside, right? Just not a lot has changed here. And what else have we got in terms of interesting charts? Yen. Basically, that's all those longs into those lows, back into those highs. Oh, the first two TPs are done. Still looking for this to press to the upside. Not a lot's changed here. Very high risk reward trade. This very nice trade. It's just stuck here in the middle of this chop range. Not too interesting for us here. We'll have to wait until tomorrow. What else? Any other chart anybody desperately wants to look at quickly? I think that's pretty much it for review. So I think that's pretty much what we're looking at in terms of the bigger charts going into the week. So this is where I'm going to pause it here for the YouTube video I'm going to post, so everybody can have a bit of a feel for what we're looking at, what's going into the week. So as usual, if you like this stuff, don't be shy about sharing, retweeting, liking, whatever. And again, have an awesome week. And I'm going to stop the recording here. So bye-bye, guys.